In this chapter's lessons, we'll implement our search functionality and learn to interact with web services. In this lesson, I want to introduce you to the data source for our application, the iTunes Store Search API. Open up your favorite browser and run a Google search for iTunes Search API. At the top of your result list, you should have a link to the Search API's documentation page. The Search API provides a web service to search for and retrieve information about content on the iTunes Store. Although we'll be restricting our interactions to artist and album data, the Search API provides info about virtually all content types on the iTunes Store, including movies, podcasts, and apps. The API allows us to issue standard HTTP GET requests. This is the same type of request that gets issued when you type a URL into your browser's address bar, and then responds with a JSON response containing the results of your query. If you're not familiar with the acronym JSON, J-S-O-N, don't worry, we'll be covering this topic in an upcoming lesson. If you scroll down in the page, you'll find some documentation for the various parameters and values that can be encoded in the URL. This table will provide a breakdown of the parameter, a description of its purpose, whether or not it's a required parameter, and then allowed values. The API is documented reasonably well, but it did take me some trial and error before I was able to get the results I needed for our search functionality. If you scroll down a little further in the document, you'll find some examples of the different endpoint calls. You'll see there are two basic styles of requests we can issue. We can use the search endpoint when we want to enter in a free-form query. You'll see a few examples under the Search Examples heading. For instance, if we wanted to find all content for Jack Johnson, we could click this first link and see the response we get. The response is a compressed JSON response, so it's not very readable. But when we get to the section on JSON parsing, you'll see that this is actually a nicely structured data set. Once we've performed a search and have a specific ID for a resource, we can call the lookup endpoint to get specific details. Under the lookup examples heading, there are some sample URLs. For instance, to look up all albums for Jack Johnson using his artist ID, we can click this link and see the response. You should now have a good understanding of the web service that we'll be using to implement our search functionality. The Search API is a great resource for any developer who wants to integrate iTunes Store content into their app.